Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission here is, well, it's pretty simple. We take a stack of challenging source material and we give you the ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed.
And today we are diving deep into a manuscript that sees financial literacy not just as a skill.
No, not at all.
It sees it as a spiritual mandate. We're looking at excerpts from The Truth About Money, Financial Knowledge Book 1, by Timsimon Kimani.
This material it's just fascinating. It doesn't just offer you tips for budgeting or something like that.
Not even close. It presents this comprehensive critique of the entire global financial system. The argument is that the structure of capitalism itself is, well, it's designed to enslave the financially ignorant.
So today we're going to unpack the author's journey, his really powerful and, yeah, often controversial findings.
And we're going to move all the way from, historical conspiracy to some deeply practical, actionable financial advice.
And the author's own story is it's absolutely crucial here. He was known all over the world as Bamboo African Bantu.
A secular hip-hop artist, right, educated in the U.S.
Exactly. And when he gave his life to Christ and returned to a developing country like Kenya, he just faced intense financial hardship. It was a real crisis of survival that, for him, revealed a pretty glaring truth, telling people that trust in the Lord is essential, but,
It doesn't pay the rent today.
it doesn't pay the rent today.
And that crisis, that's what forced him to search for practical management skills that were rooted in faith. His big realization was that spirituality without financial discipline is, well, it's incomplete.
And that insight leads to his core premise, which really redefines financial success. It's not about hoarding wealth.
No, it's about effective management.
Okay, so let's define that. That's a key term. What exactly does this source mean by management?
He defines it as the effective, efficient, correct, and timely use of another person's property and resources, with a view to producing added value. The whole emphasis is on stewardship. In his spiritual framework, God wants us to be economists.
Economists. What does that mean in this context?
It means we have to strive to get the maximum out of the minimum, the absolute most out of the least resource available to us.
That is a massive shift in perspective, viewing your resources as delegated to you, not just inherently yours.
Right, and the source reinforces this with a famous quote from Miles Monroe, who taught that answered prayer is regulated by your capacity to manage.
Anything you fail to manage, you will ultimately lose.
Precisely. The concept is crystal clear. If you can't responsibly handle a small amount of money, you're never going to be entrusted with a large amount.
And this foundation of stewardship is what allows him to launch this blistering critique of the whole system.
Yeah, a critique so sharp it echoes that famous line from Henry Ford, which the book cites. If people really understood our banking and monetary system, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning.
And that right there sets the stage for everything we are about to discuss.
It really does.
Okay, so let's unpack this central analogy because it truly defines the structural problem the author identifies. He suggests that what we're all dealing with when it comes to global finance is a real-life game of Monopoly.
Right. In the board game, every player starts with a good amount of capital. What is it, $1,500?
Something like that, yeah.
And you use it to buy property, houses, hotels. The whole goal is to collect rent and, bankrupt everybody else.
But the real-life game, according to Kimani, is rigged from the very beginning.
And how is it rigged?
Well, the devastating reality is that the vast majority of people, we're talking billions globally, they start with zero capital.
None whatsoever.
They're born onto the game board, but they don't have the cash to buy Park Place or Boardwalk.
Instead, they're immediately forced to pay. Rent, accommodation, utility fees, interest, all to the select few who already own all the essential assets.
So this isn't just a tough start. It's a structural inequality that creates exclusion.
Yeah, where poverty leads to ridicule and, crucially, exclusion from the very knowledge you would need to escape.
This cycle of exclusion, especially in the developing world, is presented as, well, inherently wicked. The author really focuses on the practice of charging children for access to knowledge.
Yes, he does. The material argues pretty vehemently that charging a child for primary and secondary education for school fees is just fundamentally wrong, evil even.
Because it creates what he calls a devastating cycle.
A total trap. You need money for the fees, but to get money, you need a job. To get a job, you need the education, which you can't get without
The money.
the money. It's a closed loop.
So if the odds are stacked against you from birth just because your parents don't have capital, How are you ever supposed to get the knowledge to compete?
The author asks it so pointedly. Who among the masses was born with startup capital? It just doesn't happen.
And excluding children based on a financial barrier, it just ensures that knowledge stays the exclusive property of the elite.
It perpetuates the class structure indefinitely. The system guarantees that the poor are just relegated to the bottom of the totem pole.
And the source connects this economic exclusion directly back to historical injustices. He's saying this isn't accidental, it's systemic.
Absolutely. Let's look at the specific historical examples he provides, starting with his home country, Kenya.
Okay.
The focus here is all on how that startup capital was distributed. The source details the period leading up to Kenya's independence, December 12, 1963.
Right.
During colonization, the British government offered huge loans and massive tracts of essential startup capital to British settlers.
Giving them a massive head start in the monopoly game.
A huge one, while the indigenous Africans were pushed onto smaller, less fertile lands.
And what happened after independence? Was the land given back?
Well, the source notes that when the British farmers left, they were compensated in full for their farms by the incoming government.
With taxpayer money.
With taxpayer money. Yet the African people from whom the land was originally stolen were never compensated. The initial startup capital stayed in the hands of the colonial powers, or, maybe more tragically, was redirected.
And the book specifically addresses what happened internally after that, citing Joe Kimisi's book, Kenya Looters and Grabbers.
Yes, this segment really highlights the betrayal of that promise. Instead of restoring the stolen lands to the people, the first president, H.E. Jomo Kenyatta, his family, and his colleagues just went on an acquisition binge.
Amassing vast amounts of prime real estate.
Just unbelievable amounts. This established a culture of impunity, and it cemented the economic dominance of a new national elite. They inherited and then distributed the essential capital among themselves.
It's the literal definition of the elite, making sure the rules of the game stay favorable to the players who are already holding all the property deeds.
And this systemic exclusion, it's not just an African story. The source draws a really direct and powerful parallel to the history of the United States.
The broken promise of 40 acres and a mule.
Exactly. This promise, outlined in Special Field Orders No. 15, was made to formerly enslaved Black Hebrew farmers.
It was meant to give them the basic startup capital, the land and the tools, to go from slavery to economic independence.
But the source emphasizes that this promise was just systematically broken.
The land and the animals were never delivered.
Which relegated these individuals to the bottom of the economic structure, ensuring they stayed dependent, lacking the capital they needed to compete.
So the overall takeaway here is stark.
It is. Whether it's through colonial land theft or broken promises of emancipation, the elite made sure they received and maintained control over all the initial wealth, rigging the financial game against the majority from the very start.
And knowing that is intended to just remove any illusion that the current global system is somehow a level playing field.
Not even close.
So, knowing the game is rigged from birth, we move to Chapter 2. Where the author argues the system isn't just flawed by accident, it's flawed by design.
Yes.
This is where the critique of Western and African education systems really gets sharp. He argues they are machines designed to produce skilled slaves.
The source is just uncompromising on this. It posits that the curriculum is intentionally structured to produce highly skilled, debt-ridden employees.
Not independent entrepreneurs or job creators.
Not at all. Not people who are purpose-driven. This education is framed as leading millions into financial darkness and the most toxic kind of debt, student loan debt.
And the scale of this trap is just massive. I mean, in the U.S., student loan debt is over $1.2 trillion.
It's staggering. And the author equates the practice of universities lending six-figure sums to 18-year-olds to extortion. He puts them on par with loan sharks.
It creates an immediate handicap. You spend years racking up all this debt for a degree that well, often it doesn't even translate into a guaranteed high-paying job.
Especially in places like Kenya where the job market is so incredibly tight. But the critique is deeper than just the debt. It's about the quality and relevance of the knowledge itself.
Right. The irony is pretty hard to ignore. Why are we learning how to achieve wealth from professors who are themselves caught in the financial rat race?
Exactly. If your instructor is financially unstable, teaching self-employment while they're still an employee themselves, the source suggests they can't genuinely teach you how to escape the system.
Because they haven't managed to do it.
They haven't. This implies that the real knowledge of wealth creation is just absent from the standard academic curriculum.
And this lack of genuine financial wisdom leads us to one of the most controversial claims in the book, rooted in history. The purpose of Rockefeller's General Education Board, the GEB.
The author cites G. Edward Griffin's analysis of the GEB, which was founded in 1903. This organization, funded by just immense private wealth, allegedly sought to influence the direction of education.
Not just improve literacy.
No, the direction. The stated goal, according to the source, was to teach attitudes that encouraged people to be passive and submissive to authority.
Passive and submissive, how does that even translate into a curriculum?
The goal was to educate citizens just enough for productive work under supervision, to be good factory workers, technicians, skilled employees.
But not enough to question the authority of their employers.
Or to challenge the prevailing economic system, or rise above their assigned class. True, empowering education was to be reserved for the children of the elite.
So the source argues this proves the system is engineered to maintain a permanent employee class.
Exactly. And the system is financially self-sustaining because universities themselves operate as these massive tax-exempt businesses.
Right. Let's clarify that status for our audience.
So many universities hold a nonprofit status, often under the U.S. tax code IRC 501c3.
Okay.
This allows them to avoid taxes on property, tuition revenue, sponsorships, capital gains from their investments. I mean, it's essentially a government-sanctioned license to print money.
And the scale of this wealth is just stunning. Harvard is the prime example he uses.
It is. Harvard's endowment fund, estimated at over $36 billion, is comparable to the entire GDP of the 96th largest economy, like Bolivia.
That's insane.
And the author points out the hypocrisy. That fund alone could theoretically pay for the tuition of 6,000 students for 120 years.
And yet student debt continues to balloon.
It just keeps doubling. The money is there, but the structure ensures the student is indebted while the institution just profits tax-free.
Yeah. Now, let's pivot back to the crushing human cost of this system. I want to highlight the examples the author shares from Kenya.
Okay.
The contrast between the high school fees and the dismal job prospects is just heartbreaking.
The source shares these stories of unemployed Kenyan graduates, and they really illustrate the tragic trap.
Yeah.
We hear about Alfred Kibet Kirui hinting at suicide because of joblessness. Ruth Rono, a first-class honors graduate who struggled for years.
And what about Martin Mutu, that story was?
Perhaps the most illustrative. A master's degree holder, and he was only offered a salary of 10,000 Kenyan shillings.
Which is roughly $100 a month.
$100 a month. And considering parents often spent, 100,000 to 450,000 shillings on fees, that salary is a brutal insult.
Mututu himself asked how that was supposed to cover rent, food, and allow him to send money home.
The source concludes that parents sacrificed their land and their life savings for a piece of paper that just guarantees debt and low wages, not self-sufficiency.
So if the formal curriculum is designed to create passive, debt-ridden employees, what essential financial knowledge are the schools neglecting?
Well, they fill students with what the source calls useless information. He uses the specific example of teaching the parts of a fly, like the compound eye.
Instead of teaching practical, real-world finance?
Exactly. Students are never taught crucial skills like how to read a financial statement, what bankers actually look at.
Or how to sell, how to negotiate.
Or maybe most importantly, how to process and face failure.
That's a powerful point. If you aren't taught how to handle failure, you're just paralyzed by the fear of trying anything entrepreneurial.
Precisely. And the typical financial advice that gets handed down, get a job, save money, buy a house, invest in stocks and bonds, is what the author labels the devil's life plan, or fake financial information. He suggests this advice is strategically designed to keep the masses dependent on employment, which he calls slavery, rather than pursuing true financial freedom. It's a purposeful misdirection.
This critique of education naturally leads us to Chapter 1, where the author reveals what he calls the dangerous truth, the mechanics of money creation. It starts with that Henry Ford quote about a revolution.
Yes.
Because the reality is, our money does not, in fact, come from the government.
Not at all. The source takes us back to 1694 England. After 50 years of war, the government needed money. A Scottish banker, William Patterson, proposed a solution: a privately owned central banking system. The idea was that this private entity would issue loans to the government.
Money created out of thin air.
Out of thin air, but repaid by the government with interest, all paid for by the taxpayer.
So this introduced the mechanism where public debt becomes private profit.
Exactly, and this history cannot be discussed without referencing the House of Rothschild, whom the author frames as the architects of this system.
Now, the author presents a highly specific and controversial historical claim here. We have to be clear, we're reporting his viewpoint.
Right. He asserts that the Rothschild family are not biblical Jews, but Khazars who converted in 740 AD. The source references Revelation 2.9, which talks about those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan.
And he details how Mayer Amschel Bauer changed his name to Rothschild.
Yes, meaning red shield, a reference to the red hexagram, which the author identifies as the Star of Moloch, or 666, that hung over his money house.
He connects this lineage directly to the formation of the Illuminati.
He does. In 1770, Mayer Amschel Rothschild allegedly commissioned Adam Weishaupt to form the Illuminati based on Talmudic teachings. The whole operation, driven by this cabal, was dedicated to one goal.
Then that goal is summarized in Mayer Amschel Rothschild's famous quote,
"Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws."
That just crystallizes the whole goal. Financial dominance is superior to political rule. So how did they execute this conquest of money in the United States?
It began in 1791 with Alexander Hamilton. This led to the creation of the first bank of the United States, controlled by the Rothschilds, with a 20-year charter.
And when that charter was denied renewal in 1811, Nathan Mayer Rothschild reacted violently.
That's the source's interpretation. This resulted in the War of 1812.
Right.
Nathan Mayer Rothschild allegedly ordered Britain to teach those impudent Americans a lesson, bring them back to colonial status.
So the War of 1812 is framed as a financially motivated conflict,
Aimed at forcing the U.S. into crippling debt to compel the renewal of the central bank's charter. This highlights the absolute determination of this financial structure to control a nation's currency.
The source then brings the story into the modern era, noting that as of May 2019, the only countries without a Rothschild central bank were places like North Korea, Iran, Sudan,
Afghanistan, and Iraq as well. The implication being that resistance to this central banking structure often correlates with conflict or political isolation.
Exactly. And the ultimate capture of America's money came with the Federal Reserve Act of 1913.
And the source stresses this was not an accidental policy, it was a conspiracy enacted in total secrecy.
Tell us about the secrecy of that Jekyll Island meeting.
In 1910, 6 men, representing a quarter of the world's wealth at the time, met furtively on Jekyll Island for 9 days to write the bill.
Wow.
Frank Vanderlip, who was there, he was president of the National City Bank, he confessed, "I was as secretive indeed, as furtive as any conspirator. Discovery, we knew, simply must not happen."
Because if the public knew this tiny cabal of bankers wrote the bill,
it would have been instantly rejected.
And the method they used to deceive the public and Congress is pretty cunning.
It's a classic misdirection. The bankers publicly protested the Federal Reserve Bill in newspapers, claiming it would ruin the banks.
So the average person assumed if the banks hate it, it must be good for us.
Exactly. Congress was fooled, and the bill was quietly passed on December 23, 1913, while most members were home for the holidays.
And this action gave the private banking cartel a complete monopoly over the creation of U.S. currency.
A model that was swiftly exported globally.
So let's clarify the mechanism. If the central bank is a private entity, how does it physically create money?
It's purely debt-based. The central banks loan money to the government, money they essentially create just by writing a check, but the government has to pay it back with interest.
So they're incurring debt from thin air.
From thin air. The Federal Reserve Bank of Boston stated it plainly. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money.
And commercial banks participate in this creation through fractional reserve lending. This is a critical concept we have to explain clearly.
Absolutely. Commercial banks, like Barclays, participate in this. When you take out a loan for a house or a car, the bank isn't lending you existing deposits.
What are they doing then?
They're literally typing new digital numbers into their computer. This accounts for about 97% of all money in circulation.
And fractional reserve lending lets them magnify this power.
It does. The rule, broadly speaking, allows banks to lend out 10 times more money than they actually hold in reserves.
So if I deposit $100,
the bank only has to keep $10. They can then lend out 90, which gets deposited elsewhere, and that bank lends out 90% of that, and so on.
This mechanism ensures a small deposit leads to a massive increase in the money supply.
All of it created as interest-bearing debt.
This structure is why Governor Martinez-Eccles of the Federal Reserve admitted if there were no debts in our money system, there wouldn't be any money.
That's the definitive takeaway. The entire system requires debt to exist, and, crucially, debt must always grow.
If people stop borrowing and pay down their debts,
the money supply shrinks. leading to financial collapse. This need for constant debt growth compels central banks to perpetually manipulate the economy.
And that manipulation manifests in planned economic booms and busts.
They control the cycle by adjusting interest rates and the money supply. We see it so vividly in the 2008 housing crisis.
Alan Greenspan.
Former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan dropped interest rates to 1%, a rate not seen since the 1950s. This low rate encouraged massive, irresponsible borrowing. That was the boom.
Which led directly to the catastrophic crash, the bust.
And the source stresses these are not accidents. They are engineered cycles.
Furthermore, the author cites Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist, confirming the central bank's destructive power.
Friedman stated unequivocally that the Federal Reserve caused the Great Depression by deliberately contracting the currency in circulation by 1/3.
So the conclusion drawn from all this history is pretty potent.
It is. The current system is fundamentally corrupt, and the only genuine solution is for the government accountable to the people to fully own and control the money supply.
Echoing Abraham Lincoln's example of the interest-free greenback.
Exactly.
So, having explored the historical and economic structure, the author insists that this entire mechanism is governed by deeper spiritual forces. And he presents evidence hidden in plain sight on the US dollar bill. We have to report on these claims with impartiality, understanding this is the author's unique synthesis of economics and faith.
Right. The author argues this system is orchestrated by the God of this world from 2 Corinthians 4.4. The symbolism on the back of the U.S. $1 bill is presented as explicit evidence of this conspiracy.
Let's conduct the deep analysis of the imagery that the source provides, starting with the eagle.
The eagle, featured so prominently, is identified not as a purely American symbol, but as the symbol of Edom or Esau from Obadiah 1-4.
Okay.
The author suggests Edom nations include the U.S., Germany, and Rome, connecting the symbol to historical and spiritual lineages that oppose the biblical narrative.
And the number 13 is highly significant across the dollar bill.
Oh, yes. The eagle holds 13 arrows for military might and an olive branch with 13 leaves for political peace. These numbers allegedly represent the 13 satanic bloodlines that the source claims rule the world.
Families like the Astors, Rothschilds, Rockefellers.
Exactly. And above the eagle, 13 stars form a hexagram.
That hexagram, which is often mistakenly called the Star of David.
The source identifies this as the Star of Moloch, or 666, citing Amos 5.26. This is alleged to be the most powerful symbol in sorcery, a sigil used to conjure evil spirits and compel behavior.
Forcing people to act against their own best interest through fear and debt.
Right. Then we have the iconic Egyptian pyramid on the reverse side.
Still with the capstone detached.
This structure, he claims, represents the throne and altar of Lucifer, and the Latin phrases around the pyramid reinforce this interpretation. Annuit coeptus means he is pleased with our progress thus far.
And Novus Ordo Seclorum.
That translates to new secular world order. So, taken together, the author posits that the entire design signifies Lucifer's satisfaction with the progress being made toward a godless new global order through financial dominance.
The spiritual link is further emphasized by the terminology used in finance, connecting the concepts directly to what the author calls the marine kingdom.
It's an interesting linguistic observation. He lists examples: liquidity, cash flow, bank.
The land alongside a river.
Right. Loan shark, float, sink or swim, and currency, from current, meaning moving water. The claim is these terms deliberately link money to water spirits. He also references the Vatican as the Holy See, or Holy See,
connecting this seat of spiritual power to marine kingdom divination practices.
It's all part of the claim.
To understand how this structure generates wealth for the architects of the system, the author uses a very vivid analogy: the shrewd life jacket salesman.
This analogy perfectly explains the boom and bust cycle driven by central banks. The shrewd salesman first quietly sabotages the ship. He puts a hole in the bottom.
This represents the central bank creating a bust or a market crash.
Exactly. Then he loudly announces the crisis and profits immensely by selling life jackets at exorbitant prices to the fearful passengers who are holding cash.
So the wealth is transferred from the scared, uninformed masses to the seller and his accomplices.
Yes. Once the transfer of wealth is complete, the salesman, who was prepared for this all along, fixes the ship, and prices return to normal.
The system uses fear and manufactured crises to transfer wealth.
And to position their agents, the banksters, to profit massively from human suffering and financial ignorance. This is presented as the deliberate strategy behind all financial manipulation.
And the author connects this manipulative financial structure directly back to ancient forms of oppression, labeling the modern system as slavery.
Yes, echoing the oppression of the Hebrews in Egypt. He draws historical connections using Deuteronomy 28, which prophesies the scattering of the true children of Israel and their return to Egypt, America, in slave ships.
Directly linking the biblical narrative to the transatlantic slave trade.
And this slavery and the colonization that followed were the financial engines that bolstered Western economies, while the victims were stripped of their identity and economic stability.
And the final piece of this systemic exploitation is the function of global charities, which the author views with profound skepticism.
Right. Organizations like Oxfam and the Red Cross are accused of sustaining an impoverished, negative image of Africa globally,
Using these huge, multi-million-dollar ad campaigns.
while collecting vast sums from innocent Western donors who genuinely want to help. The source argues that most of this money is just consumed by high salaries and operating expenses,
So one hand gives this highly visible, ineffective charity.
while the other hand, the global corporate structure exploits Africa's natural resources wholesale, perpetuating the whole cycle of dependence and exploitation.
That structural and spiritual critique is a necessary foundation, though it is heavy. But the message here is ultimately hopeful.
It is. All is not lost.
The second half of the book, which we need to focus on heavily now, insists that the path to freedom begins with transforming your mind from that of a slave to a faithful manager.
And this requires maturity from Galatians 4 and wisdom from Proverbs 24.
The shift begins with understanding income and asset classification. The author outlines 3 types of income, with a severe penalty on what he calls slavery income.
That is earned income, or your salary, for employees. It's the highest taxed form of income.
You're taxed coming and going.
You are. First, you pay income tax, which in Kenya can be up to 30%. Then, when you use what's left to buy goods, you pay value-added tax, or VAT.
Taxing the money a second time.
This system ensures that the employee provides the greatest financial contribution to the state while retaining the least amount of control.
Then you have portfolio income from paper assets like stocks. And finally, passive income.
And passive income from things like rental properties or a business that runs without you is the least taxed. This is money that works for you whether you're awake or asleep.
So the fundamental goal of this roadmap is to convert that high-taxed, labor-intensive earned income into these lower-tax, liberating forms of income.
As rapidly and strategically as you possibly can.
And the first step toward generating the capital for this shift is non-negotiable. Rule number 1, thou shalt pay thyself.
This ties back directly to stewardship in Proverbs 21.20. There is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up.
The mandate is to save 10 or even 20% of every amount of money that passes through your hands.
Immediately. This separation requires discipline.
We often talk about savings being essential, but the source makes a crucial distinction about the purpose of that saved money.
Yes, savings are strictly for investment. They are not an emergency fund or for paying bills.
Okay.
Once you develop the discipline to set aside that 10 to 20%, you harness the power of compound interest, which Einstein called the 8th wonder of the world.
And compound interest is the engine that transforms small, consistent savings into substantial assets over time.
But it only works if those funds are protected and constantly reinvested.
This brings us to rule number 2, the foundation of the wealth mindset. Invest in cash flow assets, not liabilities. This gets misunderstood all the time.
It is the single most important distinction. An asset, symbolized as an ox in Proverbs 14.4, is defined simply as anything that puts money into your pocket regularly.
So examples would be a rental property where tenants pay you.
Or a bus with a hired driver generating daily fares, or stocks that pay dividends.
Conversely, a liability takes money out of your pocket.
The house you live in, the car you drive for personal use, the expensive clothes you buy to impress people, these are liabilities, regardless of their perceived value.
Because they demand insurance, maintenance, taxes.
All of which deplete your cash flow. The author stresses that the house you live in is only an asset if it sends cash flow your way every single day.
The mindset contrast between the rich and the poor is all about this sequence of acquisition.
The rich acquire an asset before they buy a liability. They might buy an apartment complex, wait for the rental income to accumulate.
And then use that accumulated cash flow to buy the luxury car or the big TV.
Exactly. The poor and middle class rely exclusively on their high-tax salary, skip the asset step, and go straight to acquiring liabilities based on instant gratification.
Which sinks them deeper into the debt trap.
Rule number 3 is to learn the 4 financial forces: taxes, debt, inflation, and retirement. Because these are the ways the system legally extracts wealth from the financially ignorant.
Let's start with taxes.
As we mentioned, employees pay the most because they're taxed on their income before they can spend or invest it. Corporations are structured differently.
How so?
They make money, they legally spend money on business expenses, and then they pay tax only on the resulting profit.
So it's a complete reversal of the sequence.
This simple reversal allows the wealthy to dramatically reduce their tax burden. It's not illegal, it's just understanding the structure.
Next, debt. We need to clearly differentiate good debt and bad debt.
Bad debt is borrowing money for a liability, a car loan, a credit card for consumer goods, which costs you money and interest and goes down in value.
And good debt.
Good debt is leveraging the bank's money to build a cash flow asset. If you take a loan to build an apartment complex, the tenant's rent pays down the loan. You're using the bank's resources to build your own wealth.
You're turning debt into a powerful tool for growth.
Exactly. Then there's inflation, which the author views as an unfair tax resulting from the fraudulent creation of money.
Right.
When central banks print money out of thin air, every dollar already in circulation loses value, maybe 2% a year.
So saving cash in a bank is self-defeating.
Because that money is losing value, and through fractional reserve lending, your deposit actually allows the bank to print more money, increasing inflation further.
So the financially savvy person invests in hard assets.
Like real estate or gold, which tend to appreciate as inflation rises, protecting their wealth.
And finally, retirement planning.
The source offers a sharp critique of relying on government funds, like the Kenyan NSSF, which are prone to scandal and mismanagement.
So the wise manager focuses on personal asset-based retirement planning.
Exclusively. Building up cash flow assets whose income is sufficient to sustain them indefinitely, independent of unreliable state funds. Financial aptitude and foresight, like Joseph planning for famine in Genesis 41, are the ultimate investment.
This moves us into the final critical stage, the internal transformation. The author insists that poverty isn't just a lack of money.
No, it's a state of being that requires the cooperation of the host you to thrive.
So if you stop cooperating with its guiding principles, poverty has to leave.
This section is so powerful because it addresses internal sabotage. Poverty whispers certain life principles to its host. For instance, do not learn the laws of money and do not learn to be an entrepreneur.
And this principle is countered by the scripture saying that reliance on academic ability alone without practical wisdom is ruinous.
Exactly. Another principle is instant gratification. Invest in liabilities and do not invest in assets.
This is the car bought to impress people, or the house that just bleeds cash flow.
Right. And the biblical counterpoint is Ecclesiastes 11.4. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. You can't achieve freedom if you're paralyzed by fear. You have to be willing to sow.
And a major obstacle for so many people is just refusing to engage in the act of selling.
Poverty encourages people to focus on buying, not selling. People are cash poor because they hate to sell, whether it's a service, a product, or themselves in an interview. Selling requires boldness.
Like David confronting Goliath.
And optimism. The source uses that powerful analogy of the 4 lepers in 2 Kings 7 to illustrate this.
They were starving outside the city gates.
Realizing they would die whether they stayed or moved, they chose the optimistic action, moving toward the enemy camp hoping for food.
And that act of desperate optimism prompted God to cause the entire Syrian army to flee,
liberating the Israelites. The takeaway is that positive, bold action in the face of fear often yields unexpected divine liberation.
Then there is the universal mental block, fear and sloth.
Poverty demands, be afraid, be very afraid. Proverbs 22 counters this, describing the sluggard who invents imaginary dangers. There's a lion outside, to justify inaction. Fear robs potential.
And the ultimate compliance principle, sleep all day.
The source uses Proverbs 24 to warn that poverty comes quickly and violently as an armed man to the one who indulges in excessive sleep and slumber.
And if we look at the financial behavior of the two mindsets, the poor man versus the rich man, the charts are visually distinct.
In the poor man's chart, there's one source of income salary, which flows directly and completely into expenses. Food, rent, fees, liabilities. There are no assets listed.
It's a month-to-month cycle.
A completely dependent, vicious month-to-month cycle. Conversely, the rich man's financial flow is entirely different.
How so?
The rich man's chart shows assets, rental income, business profits, stock dividends that generate cash flow.
Which then covers the expenses.
Their cash flow pays for liabilities, allowing them to continuously reinvest and grow their assets, making money work for them. They aren't dependent on trading time for money.
The final wisdom here is that financial success is the sum of small, positive actions repeated consistently over time.
The author concludes that the millionaire's mind is a problem-solving, disciplined mindset. If you were to take all the money away from a millionaire,
They'd get it back.
their financial knowledge and discipline would ensure that money returns quickly. They know the rules. Conversely, giving a financially ignorant person millions often results in them being poor again soon because the internal conditioning for poverty persists.
The transformation from slave to manager is primarily a transformation of the mind.
It has to be.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner seeking actionable dominion? We've navigated the history, the spiritual critique, and the practical steps. The author summarizes the 3 pillars of sustainable wealth you have to focus on.
Stock and bond investing, but cautiously and with knowledge. Real estate, focusing on cash flow assets. And entrepreneurship, creating your own business.
The core takeaway is simple. Reverse the equation so your money works for you.
And tying back to the spiritual mandate that grounds this book, the ultimate goal isn't hedonism. The primary purpose of gaining passive income is to empower parents to gain the time and resources they need to raise their families in the fear of God.
It's about liberating families from the need for both parents to be enslaved to jobs that pull them away from their foundational responsibilities.
This speaks directly to the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. If God is our greatest investor, expecting a return on the talents he gives us, then our lives have to be viewed as an investment in the kingdom of God.
Absolutely. God does not primarily invest in buildings, he invests in people.
And the source highlights that the unprofitable servant failed not because of a lack of resources, but because of fear and pessimism. He hid his talent. That fear robs potential and prevents dominion.
We are called to manage what we've been given and produce added value.
We are.
And that leads to the final provocative thought that the author leaves us with. This deep dive into the truth about money is meant to equip you to challenge the status quo.
The current banking system of wickedness is deemed unacceptable, and the body of Christ, according to Matthew 18, has the authority to pray against its financial dominance and manipulative policies.
The current economic reality is presented not as an unavoidable state of affairs, but as a test.
It is, and the critical question for you, the disciplined disciple, is this. Are you prepared with wisdom and foresight? Are you the manager who knows the rules for the inevitable bust that follows every boom?
Knowing this dangerous truth about money means you are now equipped to move beyond the slave mindset, to occupy and dominate the financial sphere until Christ returns, fulfilling the command found in Luke 19.31. Occupy till I come.
This knowledge is your preparation for dominion.